Hello viewers, welcome to the Bachelor course of Population Studies. Today we'll discuss about the religion and population control. Introduction. Religion plays a significant role in influencing decisions about birth control use. Techniques of population control have been known to humankind from the earliest times. Among the early Islamic medical texts, sacred Hindu scriptures, there is mention of herbal contraceptives to induce temporary sterility. Different religions have different views on population control. However, no religion advocates the goal of childless marriage or to the use of population control methods outside of the marriage contract. Even those religions that seem to be most opposed to birth control have traditions that allow the use of contraceptives. Global religion-wise population data. Demographic projection by the Pew Research Center indicates that the religious profile of the world is rapidly changing. The main factor responsible for the change are fertility and mortality rates, age differences, international migration, and pattern in conversion. Over the next 4 decades, Christians will remain the largest religious group, but Islam will grow faster than any other major religion. As indicated in the Table 1, according to the Pew Research projection, by 2050, there will be near parity between Muslims, 2.8 billion or 30% of the population, and Christians, 2.9 billion or 31%, possibly for the first time in history. With the exception of Buddhists, all of the world's major religious groups are poised for at least some growth in absolute numbers in the coming decades. The global Buddhist population is expected to grow fairly stable because of low fertility rates and aging population in countries such as China, Thailand, and Japan. Worldwide, the Hindu population is projected to rise by 34%, from a little over 1 billion to nearly 1.4 billion, roughly keeping pace with overall population growth. Jews, the smallest religious group for which separate projections were made, are expected to grow 16% from a little less than 14 million in 2010 to 16.1 million worldwide in 2050. There will be vivid geographical differences in patterns of religious growth in the coming decades. One of the main determinants of that future group is where each group is geographically concentrated today. Religions with many adherents in developing countries where birth rates are high and infant mortality rates generally have been falling are likely to grow quickly. Much of the worldwide growth of Islam and Christianity, for example, is expected to take place in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, religiously unaffiliated population, by contrast, is heavily concentrated in places with low fertility and aging population, such as Europe, North America, China, and Japan. Globally, Muslims have the highest fertility rate, an average of 3.1 children per woman, well above replacement level 2.1, the minimum typically needed to maintain a stable population. Christians are second at 2.7 children per woman. Hindu fertility 2.4 is similar to the global average 2.5. Worldwide, Jewish fertility 2.3 children per woman also is above replacement level. All other groups have fertility levels too low to sustain their population. Folk religions 1.8 children per woman, other religions 1.7, the unaffiliated 1.7 and the Buddhist 1.6. Another important determination of growth is the current age distribution of each religious group, whether its adherents are predominantly young with their prime childbearing years still ahead, or older and largely past their childbearing years. In 2010, more than a quarter of the world's total population, that is 27%, was under the age of 15. But an even higher percentage of Muslim, 34%, and Hindus, 30%, were younger than 15. While the share of Christians under 15 matched the global average, 27%, as shown in the figure 1. These bulging youth populations are among the reasons that Muslims are projected to grow faster than world's overall population, and that Hindus and Christians are projected to roughly keep pace with worldwide population growth. All the remaining groups have smaller than average youth population, and many of them has disproportionately large number of adherents over the age of 59. For example, 11% of the world's population was at least 60 years old in 2010, but fully 20% of Jews around the world are 60 or older, as are 15% of Buddhists, 14% of Christians. By contrast, just 7% of Muslim and 8% of Hindus are in this oldest age category. In addition to fertility rates and age distribution, religious switching is likely to play a role in the growth of religious groups, but conversion patterns are complex and varied. In some countries, it is fairly common for adults to leave their childhood religion and switch to another faith. In others, changes in religious identity are rare, legally cumbersome, and even illegal. Next important factor that determines the growth of population in various religions is international migration. Forecasting future migration pattern is difficult because migration is often linked to government policies and international events that can change quickly. In Europe, for instance, the Muslim share of the population is expected to increase from 5.9% in 2010 to 10.2% in 2050 when migration is taken into account along with other demographic factors that are driving population change, such as fertility rates and age. Without migration, the Muslim share of Europe population in 2050 is projected to be nearly 2 percentage points lower, 8.4%. In North America, the Hindu share of the population is expected to nearly double in the decades ahead, from 0.7% in 2010 to 1.3% in 2050, when migration is included in the project models. Without migration, the Hindu share of the region's population would remain about the same, that is 0.8%, as indicated in the figure below. In the Middle East and North Africa, the continued migration of Christians into the 6 Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates is expected to offset the exodus of Christians from other countries in the region. If migration were not factored into the 2050 projection, the estimated Christian share of the region's population would drop below 3%. With migration factored in, however, the estimated Christian share is expected to be just above 3%, down from nearly 4% in 2010. Religion-wise control in Indian context. The table below indicates religion-wise data in India as enumerated in Census 2001 and 2011. At the Census 2001, 80.5% followed Hindu religion, 13.4% as Muslims or the followers of Islam, 2.3% as Christians, 1.9% as Sikh, 0.80% as Buddhist, and 0.4% as Jain. In addition, over 6 billion have reported professing other religions and faiths, including tribal religions, different from 6 main religions. Over the past decades, the total percentage of Hindus that make up the country's population dropped below 80% for the first time to 79.8% in 2011. At the same time, the Muslim community saw a population increase 24.6%, which represents the community accounting for an additional 0.8% of Indian population than in 2001. Meanwhile, the percentage that Sikhs make up in the population of India actually declined from 1.9% in 2001 to 1.7% in 2011. Growth rate. The growth rate of population in the decade 2001 to 2011 was 17.7%. The growth rate of population of the different religious communities in the same period was Hindu 16.8%, Muslim 24.6%, Christian 15.5%, Sikh 8.4%, Buddhist 6.1% and Jain 5.4%. The data on population by religious communities of census 2011 shows that between 2001 and 2011, Hindu population grew by 16.76%, while that of Muslim by 24.6%. The population of both communities grew faster during the previous decades. The pattern of use of contraceptive methods among different religions is one of the determinants of religion-wise population in the country. It indicates that religion does play a role in the adoption of family planning and the specific method adopted for contraception. The table 4 indicates that the current use of family planning methods was similar for Hindus 43.1% and Muslim 44.1%. However, use of contraception was found to be more among Muslims 72% than Hindus 50.6%. Spacing methods were more popular among Muslim couples 84.3% compared to Hindus 71.7%, whereas larger number of Hindu couples preferred terminal methods 28.3% compared to the Muslim 15.7%. Techniques of population control are embraced by religion across the spectrum as a moral good, a responsible choice, and a basic human right. The world's religions recognize that family planning helps build strong families, protect the health of the women and children, reduce child and spousal abuse, and prevent unintended pregnancies. Christianity. Christian notion about birth control stem from church teaching rather than scriptures. Since the Bible says little about contraception, so beliefs about birth control tend to be based on different Christian interpretations of marriage, sex, and family. Contraception was condemned by Christianity as a barrier to God's procreative purpose of marriage until the start of 20th century. Protestant theologians became more willing to accept that morality should come from the conscience of each person rather than from outside teaching. Within Christianity, there are different views on population control. The Roman Catholic Church disallows artificial contraception, so does the non-Catholic Christians. In 1930, use of modern contraceptives was accepted by most Protestant groups as a matter of biblically allowed freedom of conscience. Prior to 1930s, all Christian denominations were united in their firm rejection of contraceptives. The Lambeth Conference of the Church of England in 1930 marks the first departure from this unanimous prohibition by advocating the use of artificial contraception with abstinence was deemed impracticable. The Federal Council of Churches in 1931 equally adopted a policy of conservative advocacy for artificial birth control methods. Conservative and reform views, which note that sexual pleasure between married couples is permissible and sanctioned by rabbinical literature, authorize social, environmental, and economic reason for the use of birth control in addition to the health factors accepted by orthodox practice and leave the decision to individual choice. Most major Protestant traditions followed suit, and by 1961, the National Council of Churches declared a liberal policy on contraceptive use, subject to mutual consent between couples. The total prohibition of artificial birth control method by the Roman Catholic Church declared by Pope XI in his 1930 encyclical was maintained further by the 1968 the encyclical of Pope Paul VI and constitutes the present-day policy of the Church. The Catholic position on contraception is highly influenced by the natural law theory of Aristotle, Augustine, and Aquinas, which deemed that sexuality has its end purpose, procreation. To interfere in this end would be a violation of natural law and thus a sin. This view is maintained by Christian fundamental denominations as well. The Catholic Church sanctions only abstinence and natural family planning methods as suitable techniques for birth control. Many Western Catholics have voiced significant disagreement with the Church stance on contraception. According to the American Enterprise Institute, 78% of Catholics says they believe the Church should allow Catholics to use birth control, though other polls reflect different numbers. Islamism. Widespread variation on contraception attitudes can be found in the Islamic faith. Because contraception is not expressly prohibited in the Quran, many Muslim scholars approve of family planning. Yet some also believe that birth control is forbidden as the Quran contains the command to procreate an abundant number. These scholars argue that only God can decide the number of children that a couple will have. Early Sunni Muslims literature discusses various contraceptive methods and reveals that the practice of azl, that is withdrawal, is morally acceptable since it was practiced by the Prophet Muhammad. Sunni doctrine in favor of contraception suggests that any contraceptive that does not produce sterility is morally the same as azl and is therefore acceptable. Despite these varying views, Islam emphasizes that procreation within the family is a religious duty. So there is unanimous rejection of sterilization and abortion. Most Islamic tradition will permit the use of birth control where maternal health is an issue of where the well-being of the family may be compromised. The Islamic faith gives priority to human life. So being able to space out births allow a mother ample time to care for each child. In Shia Islamic countries, contraception is not only taught to married couples, but is encouraged to youngsters as well. Birth control is supported for economic reason. It helps protect the mother's life and provide her for children. Muslims also believe that contraception helps to preserve the attractiveness of the wife, thereby increasing the enjoyment of the marriage. For Muslim women, family planning is the key to their empowerment. The Islamic faith allows a lot of latitude in interpretation, which is reflected by the various differences in family planning policies by distinct Muslim groups and countries. A study on the important determinants of fertility among the Muslim majority countries of the world indicates that Islam religion per se is not the influencing factor in determining the population control techniques, but other socio-economic determinants such as literacy level, representation of women in parliament, per capita income, etc. are more important in determining the prevalence of use of contraceptive in these countries. Hinduism. Hinduism actively encourages a prolific procreation within marriage, but there is no prohibition against birth control in the Hindu religion. This means that there is no ban on birth control in Hinduism. The Upanishads describe a birth control method and temporary abstinence is advocated in the Shastra, while abortion is condemned. Still, there is a wide differentiation in views on contraception by Hindu scholars. Gandhi advocated birth control based on abstinence and not through artificial means. He viewed that contraception as a most dangerous doctrine to preach and a sin against God and humanity, while Radhakrishnan and Tagore, on the other hand, promoted the use of artificial methods. However, most Hindu accept that there is a duty to have a family during the householder stage of life, and so are unlikely to use contraception to avoid having children altogether. The Dharma, doctrine of the religious and moral codes of Hindus, emphasizes the need to act for the sake of good of the world. Traditional Hindus text praise large families, which was normal in ancient times. Yet Hindu scriptures that applaud small families also exist, which emphasizes the development of a positive social conscience. Because India has such a large and dense population, much of the discussion on the birth control has focused on the environmental issues of overpopulation rather than more personal ethics, and birth control is not a major ethical issue. India was the first nation to establish a governmental population strategy based on birth control measures. In 1971, abortion was legalized in India, and there has very rarely been any objection to it. Judaism. The Jewish view on birth control currently varies between the Orthodox, Conservative and Reform branches of Judaism. Among Orthodox Judaism, use of birth control has been considered only acceptable for use in certain circumstances. For example, when the couple already has 2 children or if they are both in school. Conservative Judaism, while generally encouraging its members to follow the traditional Jewish view on birth control, has been more willing to allow greater exceptions regarding its use to fit better within the modern society. Reform Judaism has generally been the most liberal with regard to birth control, allowing individual followers to use their own judgment if any, birth control methods they might wish to employ. It should also be noted that Jews who followed halakha based on the Talmudic tradition of law will not have sex during the 11th to 14th day after a woman begins menstruating. This precludes them from utilizing some forms of natural birth control, such as the calendar-based contraceptive methods, which are relatively unobjectionable to other religious groups. Sikhism. Nothing in Sikh scriptures condemn the use of birth control. Sensible family planning is promoted by the community. The couple decides how many children they want and can support, whether or not to use contraception and the type of birth control to use. Contraception decisions are centered on the needs of the family. Although Sikhs have no objection to birth control, they are not allowed to use it as a way to avoid pregnancy resulting from adulterous behavior. Many Sikhs use contraception, Yet, to some, birth control is associated with lust and seen as disruptive to the natural cycle of procreation. There is also no religious mandate on abortion. Some don't support it because they believe that fetus has a soul. But this decision is considered as a personal choice. Buddhism. In Buddhism, there is no established doctrine about contraception. Traditional Buddhist teachings favor fertility over birth control, so some are reluctant to tamper with the natural development of life. A Buddhist may accept all contraceptive methods but with different degrees of hesitation. The worst of all is abortion or killing of a human to be. In Buddhism, wholesomeness is the main reason for moral judgment. A notion related to this is the Buddhism belief about the duty of the parents. Buddhism preaches the importance of humans to take care of the children so that they can grow up with a good quality of life. Buddhist teaching, therefore, supports appropriate family planning when people feel that it would be too much of a burden on themselves or their environment to have more children. Birth control allows couple to plan to have certain number of children and prevent an excessive number of pregnancies. Buddhists believe that family planning should be allowed and that a good government should provide those services. Conclusion. Common concerns unite all major religious traditions on the issue of birth control. The critics of family planning in each tradition fear that contraceptive use will encourage immorality and illicit sex, while further, many non-Western faiths fear that liberal contraceptive policies encourage a Western model of living that would destroy the family and family values. Feminist commentators have viewed prohibition on birth control as a means to control female sexuality and independence. The religious profile of the world is rapidly changing. The main factors responsible for the change are fertility and mortality rates, age differences, international migration and patterns in conversion. In Indian context, also the religion-wise growth rate of population has undergone a change over a decade. Use of contraceptives among different religions being one of the most important determinant. That's all with today's lecture. I hope this must have added to your knowledge. Till then, have a nice time. Goodbye.